Hi, welcome everybody. Today's audio lecture goes over the progress report that is your very next project. We'll talk a little bit about student sample, and we're going to focus a little bit on maps. Remember maps from week 1? If you don't, go back and look at maps again. I'm going to assume that most of you do, and you've read that. All technical writing, as a reminder, including specifically progress reports, must be clear, concise, and coherent. We call that, again, the 3 C's of technical writing. Okay, so let's talk about mode. Oops, let's go down here a little bit. What are the defining features of a progress report? That's what you're all dying to know, right? What's in the thing? This type of project is particularly important to be concise because it's in medias res, or like as Shakespeare would say, in the middle of things. It's going on in real time. It's telling us what's happening right now. So we want this to be short and concise. Time is money, particularly in business, as you know. Often this progress report will be formatted like a memo. So you might see headings like to, from, date, regarding. Sometimes there'll be a cover sheet, sometimes there won't, depending on what type of project you're doing and the business that you're working for. These details kind of depend on the organization often. Most progress reports for me, for this class, will run 2 to 4 pages. Now there is one exception to that, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But for most of you, I expect to see 2 to 4 pages, which might be a little longer than a progress report you're doing for another class. As a reminder, you're taking my class in conjunction with your class because this class is to kind of help you talk to people who are not in the engineering field, communicate with us. That means we need often a little bit of context, we need a little bit of detail, and that's why yours is a little bit longer for me than it might be for your professor in a different class. So depending, what I'd like to see is a lot of headings. What bosses like to see is a lot of headings. This is really helpful to define giant blocks of text, and it allows the reader to skim to that specific piece of information that they're looking for, particularly a boss who's very short on time. A progress report is often considered a type of internal correspondence, usually to a boss. Sometimes you're sending a progress report to a client, possibly. You might send something once a week just to say, here's where we're at. Let's take a look at contents. Okay, again, be very straightforward. The first section, all of you will have a section entitled Introduction. This should be really quick and short. It might even be a couple of sentences. This is a report on the progress of XYZ project, and so on. The next thing you're going to have is a project summary. Now, this is also a type of introduction, but again, remember that this is a little bit of context. Keep in mind that you are talking probably to a manager, a boss. That person is very, very busy, and they probably are overseeing multiple projects. Now, I'm a perfect example of this. I probably have 60 of you at one time that are all sending me your progress reports. I have a spreadsheet that tells me about every one of you, but it's really helpful to have a project summary real quickly right in front of me saying, this is what I'm doing, this is where, this is what we're doing all together. So this is true for a boss, it's also true for me, to give you a little bit of what's going on. Okay, so next part of mode, remember maps, M is mode, right? This is where we're going to talk about work completed so far. This is a part where we talk, it's obvious, where do you stand at the moment. This section might be broken down into a couple more subsections, especially if you have a large-scale project. But you also might have this organization 2 different ways. You might have it organized chronologically, first, second, third, fourth. But another way to organize this section would be thematically. And you can choose whichever works best for you. If you do something thematically, you might organize things by hardware, software, something that makes sense to your particular project, depending on just what makes sense. So for those of you who are in English or some other field that's not engineering, you might find that this section is just a couple of descriptive paragraphs. Those of you in engineering might have to have more in detail. All right, problems encountered. In reality, none of your projects are probably going exactly the way you envisioned them. Is that right? That's the way these projects kind of go. You'll be discussing this in depth. You are not avoiding problems. You're going to talk about, what are the delays? What are the complications? Things are costing more. Maybe you had to find a new supplier for parts. Maybe, you know, somebody went out of business and you had to figure out a way to come up what to do with that. Maybe if you're doing secondary research, like some of you are, you found out that the type of questions that you were asking were way off base. So you went in to find your research and you found out, whoa, we have to recalibrate this entirely. This is not going the way we wanted to. We have to come up with new research questions. We have to adapt. This is totally expected in this particular section. You're going to be talking about what that means. Sometimes this is a list, bullet points. Sometimes it's paragraphs. It kind of depends on what works best here. Next, work yet to be completed. What's left, of course, right? Now, again, this section might be shorter or longer depending on how well the first sections have gone. Phase 1 went well. Phase 2 is going as planned or not. How are you going to accomplish that work? That's what we really want to know here, right? A bullet list here is probably a good way to do this. Bullet points, 1, 2, 3. We have yet to do this, this, and this, right? Make sure that you use parallel structure, as I talked about in your resumes. If you're still confused on what parallel structure is, give me a holler in an email, and I'll send you some more information about how that works. Bullet points, parallel structure are really important to engineering, particularly because you want things to be skimmable and quick. Updated time or Gantt chart. Now, both of these things go together, right? Work to be completed, updated Gantt chart. You should have both. I want to see both a Gantt chart and I want to see a timeline. This should illustrate work that's not yet done yet, but oftentimes the Gantt chart is really done for you and for your group. So sometimes you'll have abbreviations and that sort of thing. Gantt charts are often hard to read, as I've mentioned. So make sure that you include a timeline, which kind of sort of helps explain the Gantt chart, and they work together. So I should be able to look at both of those and go, okay, here's a timeline. It kind of explains the Gantt chart. Oh, I see what that means. Make sure that this is, again, for a really busy person like a manager. Color code things that are done. All right, this part's done. This part's yet to do, so that I can clearly and easily see where you're at. Okay. All right. The next part of MAPS, MA, is audience. Who the heck is your audience here? So, again, in your real life, when you go off to become an engineer, you're going to have multiple audiences just like you do in this particular class. We have managers who are in your field. Those are the easy ones. Those are the people that think just like you, right? Then there's going to be managers who are outside your field. Marketing, human resources, project management, all kinds of these things. Those people have to be able to understand what you're talking about too. We also have colleagues in other departments who are working on perhaps another section of your project and have to fit them together. And of course you have professors. The manager out of field is kind of where I fit really, and that's the educated layperson. I'm educated, but I'm educated in a different field. You have to be able to explain things to me as well as to your engineering friends, colleagues. Okay. MAPS, purpose. So we have MAP. P is purpose. What is the purpose of a progress report? Well, of course, it's informative. You're telling people about something. It's also, to agree, though, persuasive. In this case, you are going to have to be persuasive to convince readers that you are still competent, that you are still conscientious, that you're still doing what you told them you were going to do. So when I read your progress report, I have to say to myself, this is going well. They run across problems, but they've found ways to fix them. They're on track. They're on target. They're still doing what they're supposed to be doing. It is possible that this late in the game, projects do have to be revamped and restarted. That has happened. That'll happen in the business world as well, where sometimes you have a project in mind, you envision something, and it doesn't work. And you have to retool the whole thing. So that's where the persuasive element comes in. Another part of this progress report that's really important is that you are also building and maintaining the goodwill with others. Those people outside of your field, you have to still let them know, hey, we're on the same track, we're on the same field, we understand each other. And a last but very important piece, a progress report, and maybe multiple progress reports, will create a record of this project in development, i.e. cover your backside. So should something go wrong, should a client complain, this happens. Should there be some sort of legal issue, you have a track record of things that say, hey, this is what I did, this is what I said I was going to do, this is what I did, here is what, here it is in paper, here it is in real time. These are really important for multiple reasons. Okay, so another part of progress, I thought I'd put this in here. This is a quote from a student in the past. This is important. Not only does the progress report really help, those people that are looking in on your report, but the progress report really helps you. This sort of helps you to stop, take a break, and go, okay, this project is really huge. Sometimes it gets, in my head and it messes with me. Where am I at? So the progress report helps you stop, take a breath, and sort of take stack of where am I right now? Am I where I thought I would be? What do I have to do to make this thing work? So it helps you with the scope of the project. So not only does a progress report help outside people, it also is intended to help you and possibly your group. So keep that in mind, that it helps you be systematic, and that's important as an engineer or in any field really, to be systematic about what you want to do, especially with a huge and giant project like these are. All right, situation. So we have MAPS. S is situation. What's the situation? We have two. One are for the majority of you, and those of you are senior design students, right? So some of you, many of you, have already had to do a progress report or 2 or 3 for another professor. Some of you will be revising those progress reports and usually adding to them, because the progress report for me, remember, it contains more context, more information, perhaps even a visual aid if that's necessary. So they're going to be longer for me than they probably will be for other professors if you're in a senior design project. Okay, so now do keep in mind that a lot of the information and writing that you're doing right now, you'll be collecting and recycling and including in the final white paper. So the more writing that you're doing now, it's useful for later also. So it's not something that is a useless project for you. Okay. If you're working in a partnership with others, like many of you are, again, you may submit a single document with only one, make sure that all people's names are on it. Only one member of that group needs to submit it. If all of you are going to make sure that you send me a little thing in Blackboard. Blackboard's really annoying, so you have to let me know that this person in our group has submitted the document, and these are the group members. So you have to submit something in order for me to give you some feedback. Now, there is 1 or 2 problems with doing things as a group. Mark this here. One person is responsible for it, but all the rest of you are responsible to make sure that it gets done and gets done well. If that person submits it late or incompetently, all of you are on the hook for that. So you all get a late grade and you all are penalized by a poor performance. So make sure that you are overseeing this and that things are up to your specs. Okay, everybody else situation. If you are an English major, if you are a music major, if you are in phase 1, because you don't have phase 1 and phase 2 in your particular engineering degree, this is who I'm talking to. You are going to be writing from scratch. Okay, you haven't done a progress report for some other class, so you're starting all over for this. You are probably going to be writing something that is shorter. So most of you are writing 3 to 4 pages. Those of you who are writing secondary research, you're probably writing 1 to 1.5 pages. And the reason for that is because the scope of your things requires you to go and do research, do interviews, collect information. So you're going to be able to say this a little bit more quickly. You might be able to say something like, hey, I've gathered all my articles. I've annotated all my articles. I'm 3/4 of the way through my article collection. You can say it a little bit more quickly. You can be a little more detailed than that, obviously. But you might be saying, I'm gathering data from my interviews. This is what I've gathered so far. This is the problems, and so on. Okay, so you'll be a little bit shorter. So you're the one and only exception to this rule. Okay, now I'm going to show you where 2 more things are. I'm not going to go over them. But if you're in our class here, you're going to see if I've gone to home, I've gone to important documents. Once I get to important documents, I've gone to the writing samples and instructions clearinghouse, and then the folder that's progress report data. You'll see there's a transcript here.